To the average passerby, Parkway Drive in Fresno, California might look like a bunch of motels clustered on a service road by the freeway. But to an entire community of children and families, that cluster of motels is a neighborhood, and the rooms in those buildings are their homes.
I tend to have this very optimistic, very colorful lens in which I see this community because I love it so deeply and I walk it regularly.
That was Richard Burrell. And this community that he loves so deeply, is one that he knows very well because it's where he spent many years of his own childhood. And that history there gives him the ability to see that neighborhood through two sets of eyes. If we were visiting him now,
I would be walking you to some of the best tacos and taco places, restaurants that exist in Fresno. What other folks would see is the gang culture that exists here. What I would be describing to you are mothers who are doing their absolute best to take care of their children. What most folks see is sex workers.
Parkway Drive has seen decades of disinvestment, and you can see the results of that every day.
And to be totally just blunt and clear, Parkway Drive is an active crime scene nonstop. There is always something going on there, always.
still today.
Yeah, I just came from there. Yes, still today, like right now. I've lived on and in the motels along Parkway Drive through various parts of my life, right? As a child, as an adult, dealing with some unresolved trauma. And for the last 12 to 13 years as an adult who is facilitating conversations that as a community will help us heal.
These conversations that Richard is referring to, and a lot of other high-impact youth programming, all happen under the umbrella of a nonprofit community center Richard started in 2012 called Live Again Fresno.
I refer to this as a sacred space in the middle of a neighborhood that doesn't hold much sacred.
Now Richard is building off of his long history in Fresno to help reshape its future. Welcome to PathBreakers, a show about what it takes to cut through the noise and red tape and all of the other obstacles to progress. I'm Tracy Pearson, and I work on the communications team at the Kresge Foundation.
And I'm Jamie Bennett. I work at the intersection of arts, culture, and equitable community development. On each episode, we talk with a different pathbreaker who's forging new ways forward in their community.
On this episode, Jamie is talking to Richard Burrell about making physical and emotional space for the generational work of deep healing.
Yep, as you may have guessed from the way Tracy phrased that, I got to host this one solo while Tracy was off on a well-deserved break. Richard, it is great to be with you today. As we kick off, would you just mind introducing yourself? Give us your name, tell us your title, your affiliations, and where you're calling in from today.
Absolutely. Thank you. My name is Richard Burrell. I'm the executive director and founder of Live Again Fresno. We're calling in from the dead center of Fresno, Parkside, Jane Addams neighborhood.
I feel a little guilty admitting this, but I've never been to Fresno. But just, for folks that are like me who haven't visited, tell me just a little bit about Fresno. What is this place? What is there?
First of all, we are dead center, middle of California. Could not get any more central in the Central Valley than Fresno. Fresno has a very rich and unique history to it. Mm-hmm. Whether you're looking at it through the Native American perspective or the farmers and multiple immigrant groups that have come here and contributed to the culture that exists, or on a smaller scale, the specific neighborhood that Live Again Fresno operates out of and partners with folks in. We are in the Parkside Jane Addams neighborhood. This neighborhood was established in the early 50s, and before the creation of Interstate 5, this was a place where Nat King Cole, Frank Sinatra, Bing Crosby, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Elvis Presley, they all were here in this place less than half a mile away from where I'm at right now, at this place called the Hacienda. That culture that existed created this very rich and vibrant community.
Yeah.
It also was the beginning of this sex, drugs, rock and roll thing happening in Fresno. Once airline travel got more efficient and Interstate 5 was created, the rock and roll left and the sex and drugs stayed here.
Wow. And is that history? And like, if I wanted to learn more about that history, is there a book, a documentary?
I am so glad that you asked that question. It took a lot of discipline for me to not mention this documentary. It's called Motel Drive. In that film is 8 years of our work here in this community, working with this neighborhood. This film is important because it shows one family, a husband, a wife, and a son who lived almost their entire life here in the motels on Parkway Drive. It is intense. It is a very hard to watch film that does a phenomenal job at capturing what real life is like through the eyes of one family and highlighting the importance of place-based organizations and leadership who stays in close proximity to their community members.
How did you arrive on Parkway Drive? Did you grow up in Fresno?
I was actually born in the Bay Area. I was born in the foster care system to a mother who was only 15 years old. My mom's foster mother at that time had learned that my mother was pregnant from an indigenous man and kicked her out. So we went from home to home to home to battered women's shelter to battered women's shelter all over the Bay Area. I had a really hard time at one point in my life, just endured a lot of abuse. And I got shipped off to Montana to go live with my grandfather. That was probably the most beautiful time in my childhood that I could remember, and it taught me a lot of the core values that I hold on to today, as far as being present and emotionally available. When my mom had sent back for me to come back to California, this is where she brought me to
Fresno.
This is to Parkway Drive, to Motel Drive, where I'm at today. And so I didn't know any different as a kid. Drug addiction knows no prejudice, nor does poverty, right? So like everyone is kind of in the same boat, and it didn't matter what race, ethnicity, color you were, we were all just struggling. And so as far as I was concerned as a little kid, I lived in an apartment complex where all these different things happened, right? And it was normal. Then there became a time in my adult life, we had moved away and obviously life goes on. There was a time in my adult life when I had this inner struggle. I'd spent 20 years raised up in gang culture and 100% not just identified, but like believed in the cause. Mm-hmm. And then I started having kids and I wanted to be a father. But to me, this was this like magical, mythical thing that I had heard about and I see in movies, but it didn't exist in my neighborhood. It didn't exist anywhere in my life. I wanted to be that thing. I just didn't have the tools or the vehicle to get me there. And so I knew that not like I couldn't carry a firearm or be an active gang member and be a father at the same time. It was a CC2, a counselor in prison, who actually like taught me this lesson. I was a very big man. He was a relatively small man. Mm-hmm. And he scared the shit out of me, to be honest. I sat down, cuffed up. He asked me my name and what I did. And I said, my name is Richard Burrell. It's in your file. I'm a father. And he slammed this file shut so hard that it made me jump. And he started tearing up and said, you cannot be. You cannot be. Your children are at home and you are here. You cannot be a father. A father, Richard, is the highest title a man can carry. You are not that. You may be at some point. Today you are not. And I cried. I'm in a level 4 prison, getting ready to get shipped to another maximum security prison. And that man's words stung. They were true. They stung so bad. And when I was being escorted back to my cell, like I held on to that. I was like, man, I want to be a father though. And so when I was paroled from prison, I didn't know, like, where does a father start? What do I do? And so I started seeking out like mentors and folks in the community who I could see that they were doing a good job at being a dad. And I started asking them questions and spending time with them. But during that challenge, the inner conflict of like identifying as a member of this specific gang for so long and wanting to be this thing that I had no idea what it was created a bunch of inner conflict that I just started self-medicating and drinking. And so there was a period of my life, probably about a year, where I came back to the motels and I lived there, and then was able to find some help and get myself on my feet and figure out how to move forward, to learn about emotional intelligence and to actually like take the steps towards becoming a father. Then in 2009, I went and sat on a mountain. It sounds crazy, but I sat on a mountain for a few months, just seeking out, calling out to Creator, calling out to God, saying like, I want to do better. How? Where? Right? Like, what do I do? I had this very beautiful mountaintop experience that's probably a whole nother podcast. And then I came back home to Fresno and I understood exactly what I was supposed to do. I didn't know anything about a 501c3, nonprofit, CBO. Like, that was all a foreign language to me. What I did know is that there were 40 children who were living at a motel that had these huge, huge challenges in front of them. And so I decided that I worked at this glass plant called PPG, that I would take a portion of my work check and I would invest it in the lives of those children. And so we started an after-school lunch program there, and then an art program, and then a music program in the middle of all the things that Parkway Drive is. Federal law enforcement is on the scene often. Fresno Police Department is on the scene all day. And I've heard local leadership from law enforcement say there's no way to stop it. Once they take folks out of leadership, it's a vacuum, right? It's just the next folks that are willing to rise up and take over that spot. And so it's very challenging.
And Richard, for folks that sort of aren't familiar with what today is an organization, your work, just take us a step back. Why are 40 children living in a motel? Just talk to us a little bit about those motels and what the community is that's there.
Yeah. So I can talk about what was, what is, and what will be. So what was absentee owners who owned the motels along Motel Drive, but didn't live here. Mm-hmm. So for the Fresno end, which doesn't exist anymore, it's the southbound on-ramp at Clinton and 99 now. The folks who owned that were a plastic surgeon, a tax attorney, and some other wealthy man who lived in LA. I only know this because I tried to track them down to talk to them about things that were going on there, right? So for the most part, it was folks who didn't live here, didn't have any interest at all in what was happening. It was, in some cases, revenue for them, and others a tax write-off because the business was failing and falling apart, right? But on a much smaller scale and dealing with real life, these were some of the most corrupt and inhabitable places where families actually lived for very long periods of time. So in these motels, which are depicted in the film Motel Drive, mm-hmm. You have families who lived in, just utter chaos and squalor. There was literally raw sewage that poured out into parking lots where children played at. And it took me about a year to get to a place where the mothers who lived there trusted that I wasn't a social worker or an undercover police officer, to where I finally cultivated a relationship to ask, hey, why do the kids play where the raw sewage is pouring out? Mary's response was, where else are they supposed to play? There's 27 high-level sex offenders, registered 290s, who live there. Of course we're going to let them play here. So it made more sense for the moms to let their kids play where this entire 4 units of raw sewage poured out into a parking lot. In their words, and they would prefer to do that instead of dangle their children in front of the windows of these known sex offenders. It was the harsh reality of that place. Folks were not supposed to live there under the conditional use permits for longer than 28 days. The average stay for families in the motels along Parkway Drive was 3 to 5 years. That was on average. Some stayed there as many as 7 to 9. Very challenging. That is what was. What is happening today is you have Fresno Housing and the city of Fresno making substantial investments in improving the way that the entire landscape along Parkway Drive looks like. So they've bought the motels. They have renovated a handful of them. Fresno Housing has just completed the second brand new low-income, sustainable, long-term housing apartment complex on Parkway Drive. So you have Promesa, which is already full, Manzanita, which is leasing up and will be open in June. Yeah, it's incredible to work in and partner with this community for as long as I have and see this much change come in just the past 3 years.
Listening to you talk about this and listening to talk about the work, I'm remembering a sermon that a pastor gave who sort of said, all you can do is the next right thing, right? And we've been talking in this series with a bunch of folks who lead organizations and lead programs and have sequenced and scaffolded programming, and you have outcomes and theories of change. And it seems like you sort of came into this community, rejoined this community and said, let's going to do the next right thing. And how do you sort of go from looking at that thing in front of you that you need to do and turning it into this sort of structured program, this organization, getting national funding from the Kresge Foundation? How do you go from that sort of spontaneous be with the person and turn something into something that exists in that language of CBOs and nonprofits and all of that nonsense?
Yeah, so that's a great question. It's making me smile right now because initially I got told, for years, that I was doing everything wrong and I was doing it backwards. Because the model that existed, which I didn't have this great education, right? Like this huge education behind me. So I didn't know about it. But the model that existed was you find the funding, right? You create your 501c3, you find the funding, you get your staff, you get your building, and then you connect to the people. Well, I did it backwards. I connected to with the people for over 2 years, paying everything out of my own pocket. And then created the 501c3 and then found the funding and then created jobs for the people from the community, right? Again, our bodies heal just like our communities from the inside out. So to speak to a community and say, I see you, I love you, we eat, shop, everything in the same place, and then go hire folks from some other place to come facilitate the healing made absolutely no sense to me.
Yeah, the thing, maybe the most painful thing that I've heard you share today is that people thought that starting with people was backwards. And that, anytime you start with a pile of money looking for a problem to solve, you've already gone wrong.
I believe so. And so, like, just to double down on that, we have monthly community meetings here. And if you didn't know any better, you would think it was just a party. Mm-hmm. Very loud music, excellent food, very diverse crowd from all over the community gathering, right? And we sit and we eat and we play loteria and bingo. We have fun games, and our team and some other folks are in the crowd, in the community that we walk alongside with, and they're asking questions while we're sitting down at family style, cookout style meals to figure out what is the next right thing that we need to do. Is it getting a school bus stop moved? Is it crosswalks? Is it advocating for sidewalks? Is it addressing air pollution because of the significantly higher percentage of kids in this neighborhood who suffer from chronic asthma, right? What is the next right thing for us to do? And as a community, that voice is elevated and we walk forward in that.
I have a sort of community organizer elder that I've learned a lot from, who said that the only 3 things you need to organize any community are music, food, and children. And it sounds like, Parkside Jane Addams has those 3 of those in spades, so it's going to do just fine. You've said a couple of times, you've talked about healing and the need to heal from the inside out. And you talked about the issue of trust. And how do I know that you're actually here to help me in the way I need to be helped, and not to take my kids away, and not to, kick me out, not to do these other things. There's so much trauma and so many different kinds of trauma that folks that you work with have been experiencing. How do you deal with that sort of trauma as you think about the next right thing, as you think about building the programming, as you think about developing this campus?
Yeah, we actually have a room here that's called the Refocus Room. It's a small office. It has like sensory toys and journals and coloring books. And what I've learned is that when we are given the opportunity to enter a space that is safe, and we give ourselves permission to feel safe, repressed or unprocessed traumas will come up. And so that room serves a very specific purpose for our young people here who come here and they're able to have some quiet time. So for a child who had been living in a motel 3 to 5 years at a time, like there is no privacy there. So the luxury of having a quiet room to yourself is huge. And so that young person being able to access a room with a comfortable chair to themselves is disarming in itself. And then we have staff who comes in and sits and talks with them, helps them work through some of the stuff, the hardship, identify whatever the challenge is. So the challenge could be, I haven't seen my mom in 2 days. I haven't eaten in the last day because I haven't been at school, whatever the thing is. And to be quite honest, like more times than not, a young person will enter that room because they've disrespected somebody here on staff, cussed at them, or just done something super offensive. And so it's their choice to enter that room, which then after a 5-7 minute time by themselves, 2 adults, like staff will go in there and sit and work through a script to help them figure out what's wrong. We help the young person to identify exactly what the challenge is, right? So it's identify it, deconstruct it. What are our options towards healing that? Like, what are the avenues? Reconstruction. Then the most important part is reintroduction to tribe or reintroduction to family. And what that looks like is little Richard apologizing to Miss Janessa, our program manager, who I may have cussed out or whatever, right? And so for our young men here, that is super important. The context and the language for which they view and speak to women that's modeled here in the community is very vulgar, very disrespectful. The assignment or the what's being asked of the young man is, did you hurt anyone by your words or your actions here today? Yes. So they take accountability. I said whatever it was to Miss Janessa. Do you want to heal that? Yes. My bad does not cut it. I apologize. Not even close. The language that we suggest to them is, Miss Janessa, I said this thing that was offensive and disrespectful. When you're ready, will you please accept my apology? I have not yet seen one young person, male or female, work through that entire phrase. They get as far as, I am sorry for what I did. When you are ready. And then they break into tears. The vulnerability that comes in that moment of saying, I love you and I know I did something to hurt you. I'm accepting accountability for it. When you're ready, will you please accept? Like, they can't get there. It's usually just like drowned out by tears and the want to be nurtured. This is how we heal. So it wasn't necessarily on the staff member or on our team to like address that or to carry that. It was to help facilitate a conversation to figure out like what the actual cause to this thing was. And then leave it on the individual to say like, yes, I'm choosing to accept accountability and I want to walk towards healing. I want this relationship. I want reciprocity. I want like to know when to be known. And I know that I can't do that by pushing everyone away from me. And so we understand as adults who have endured healing and done some of the inner work, right? That like those moments can be very intense for the person
Yeah.
because like the vulnerability and the fear of rejection and all of that, right? Like we need to just be as open and as comforting as we possibly can. Understanding this is probably something that's very new to this person.
Richard, I'm sure there's someone has said it in a better way, but my experience is that oftentimes the only way through is through, and you got to do it. You got to do the work, and you got to get through all the steps, and there aren't shortcuts and there isn't going around. Talk to me about your organization. How many people does it take to make sure kids got lunch, got a place to you must be a gazillion dollar, thousands of people entity doing all of this work.
That's the dream. Yeah, right. My favorite Bob Marley quote, I won't even get into it. There's a quote where Bob Marley talks about like numbers. This man asks him about him being wealthy and being rich. And Bob Marley says, you're talking about numbers. Numbers never end, which means you're forever chasing them. Right? I am wealthy because of my relationships. And so I can start like at the relationships that are the closest to me would be our staff, our team here, which is comprised mostly of moms from the community. There are 12 folks who are on staff here who do an amazing, incredibly amazing job from art, music, social emotional groups, all the curriculum that's taught here, meals that are cooked every day by us. They do an amazing job, including transportation. We have drivers who go to the neighborhood, pick up kids, and bring them here just to make sure that they're safe, that they're never risking exchanging their personal safety for a hot meal or to connect with a mentor or a tutor, right? We make sure that we pick them up for free. They're here for the duration of program, and then we take them back home. And then we have our community members, the moms, grandmothers, and fathers from this community who show up and actively support everything that we do here. We understand that it literally takes a village, and so the village is showing up. The village knows that they are seen, they are heard, they are known, and they are always welcome here. I have an incredible board for Living in Fresno. The board, very active in everything that we do. And then we have folks like Kresge and some of our other community partners here, including the Central Valley Community Foundation, that do an amazing job at making sure that there are resources made available so that we can continue to do the work that we do.
That's amazing. And you talked about a lot of construction that's happening. So talk to me a little bit about the construction. What's going on? What's being built?
So the goal was creating the organization, and then creating the space, and then creating jobs for people from the community, and then art, music, garden, and then buying the land that we're on, which is state of California. And Joaquin Arambula, State Assembly member Joaquin Arambula, allocated $1 million out of the California state budget for us to buy the piece of land that we're on right now. So it was, and then buy the place and then build a new building, which we're literally a few weeks away from like the beginning of that now. We're at the final end of our permitting phase. I needed to raise 1.3 million. I'm like 900 and something into it. And so like we're almost there. Yeah. And so this place where we're at right now is an Ethiopian church. It was owned by an Ethiopian church. We've totally outgrown this space here. We know that we need a much larger space to meet at for our community. And we need a kitchen that will help us scale the meals that we do daily, right? And so one of the most beautiful things about this kitchen, one is that like it's dang near restaurant, almost commercial space. Mm-hmm. Two is that our kids, our young people from the community will be helping us to create the meals there from the outside looking in. From the inside looking out, the notes that they're taking, the measurements that they're writing down, the ingredient list that goes into the journals or the books that they're writing is a cookbook that they will take home. We know that there's two very different groups of young people that come here. For some of them, their parents are involved in sex work or drug activity in the neighborhood. For a much larger percentage of the young people here, their families are migrant farm workers. So they as well might not see mom and dad for a few days at a time while they're up working Salinas, Watsonville, Gilroy in the fields. And so making sure that they have a cookbook, right, so that they can support their siblings, that wasn't handed to them. They literally helped to write the thing, gives them so much ownership in it.
Richard, we've talked with a couple of folks in this series who are involved with campuses. There's someone who's working with HBCU campuses. There's the Marygrove campus in the middle of Detroit. It sounds to me like with all of these buildings and all of these physical spaces going on, that you all have something of a campus there. Can you just orient me, give me the map of sort of what are all of the places that make this up?
Absolutely. So 1145 West Hedges, this is our headquarters. This is where a lot of the magic happens at. I love this space because we are in the neighborhood, but not of the neighborhood. Parkway Drive and all of the beautiful and wild stuff that exists there is right across the street, like just down across the intersection. We are at the end of a cul-de-sac, which creates a space where whatever happens here, like folks from the neighborhood who may be a threat, that threat isn't seen here or felt here. Because when you are here, you feel like you're literally in a different place. The new building that will be built here is just to the south of this building. So again, this was a building that was owned by an Ethiopian church. This space will be strictly admin. We're undergoing a remodeling here in this building. And to add to that, we also have smaller satellite sites throughout the community. So there are two very large mobile home parks that house a huge Oaxacan population. And so we utilize their community spaces there. They call them clubhouses at those places. And we've also created jobs for folks from there. One as a way to say, like, we totally value your input. We want you at the table with us. And then also the language barrier that exists, right? Most folks from Oaxaca, they may understand Spanish, but they speak Mixteco, one of the higher low dialects. And so making sure that we have folks on our team that can like clearly and concisely like translate what it is that we're trying to say is super important. And lastly, because we have like a very beautiful zoo housed in an amazing park just across the street here, that is our third satellite site. So every Thursday from the hours of 3 to 6, the zoo, Chaffee Zoo, shuts it down to public and opens it up just to our young people from the community. They've given us an education space there and a green space, which we share in meals there, help with homework, and then their amazing staff helps our young people learn about the different exhibits that exist there, how to care for, what goes into it. It is amazing.
That's fantastic. And I even love you've done it again. I love that you don't see a dead end, you see a cul-de-sac.
Yeah.
So I love everything about the way you roll. I totally love it. But there are two things that really are striking to me about your work, which is one, you're really doing generational work. You're really talking about mothers and their kids. And we're talking about a 20-year time horizon, not a 12-month one. And the other thing is that you're really inviting people to see multiple truths at the same time, right? To see the sex workers and to see the mothers, to see the dad who's crying and to see the systems that cause him to feel unsafe and to be unfed. How do you reconcile, how do you deal with the tyranny of time that so much about philanthropy and nonprofits tries to impose?
That is such a challenging question. I think, to be totally honest, Kresge has been the first foundation, the first group of people to actually give me a platform to string together words to try to sum that up. So often in philanthropy, you're given this 1-year, 2-year funding cycle where you're expected to scale or franchise the work that you're doing rather than cultivate and harvest relationships. In my experience, it takes a year to start to build a relationship. It takes another year after that to build trust. It probably takes another year or two after that to organize people around an idea, and maybe another year to like activate them around that idea. And so to expect actual change in a 1 to 2 year funding cycle is challenging. unless the goal is to franchise and just have a bunch of flags planted in a place. To cultivate actual change takes time.
Yeah. How can I move on and scale when we haven't finished with those 40 children yet, right?
Yeah.
The work is still there. They're still growing.
This was the question that was asked by a Kresge board member. Short of millions of dollars falling on your head today, Richard, what is your plan for scaling and sustainability? Jamie, I started sweating because I said, this was my answer. With respect to my colleagues here on this panel, we all need money, right? Like we need money to do what we do. But scaling to us as an organization doesn't look like bigger, shiny, brighter. It doesn't look like franchising. It looks like deepening relationships. It looks like that. That's scaling the work in a way that promotes health and healing. And sustainability has to do with more relationship than it has to do with revenue. It has to. I've watched cities just like the city of Fresno go through huge budget deficits and shut down community centers at city parks that feed children who don't have access to food. Like they shut those down. The CBOs and nonprofits around those community centers and around those parks stepped up, had those centers open, and they implemented curriculum, resources, art, music, gardening, right? Because of the relationships that existed within that community, the resources continue to keep growing and thriving. If we focus more on the relationship part and stop focus on like, who else is competing for this grant, right? Yep. If we focused a lot more on the relationship building, that's long-term, scalable, right? Healing that actually happens, that is needed. If we're going to address what's going on in the community, look at the symptoms, of course, right? Identify what the symptoms are, but let's start to like move towards what is causing this or what has caused this in the past so that we can work towards healing as a community, as us.
Yeah. Well, Richard, there's another person in the Kresge orbit called Mindy Fullylove who's done some really amazing work around collective recovery, around root shock, around the kind of analysis. And I'd love to sort of bring her into conversation with you, ideally over tacos on the Strip.
Hey,
listening to some music, walking along Parkway Drive, getting to know the Jane Addams neighborhood. But before we adjourn so we can do that, I want to close with just a lightning round of questions. Just a different mood, a different part of your brain.
Yes.
I'm just going to sort of rapid fire 10 of these things for you. So, Richard, if you and I went to karaoke tonight, what song would you sing?
Oh my gosh. I was just singing this the other day. I don't know the name to it. Making my way downtown, something. I was just singing that the other day.
I love that. When you wake up in the morning, coffee, tea, or something else?
Coffee for sure.
Awesome. What's the best thing about being a girl dad?
My gosh, there's so many things. I wouldn't even know where to start. I don't. Waking up to breakfast on Sunday mornings that they made, getting I love you texts throughout the day and throughout the week, being able to drop my beautiful children off in the morning time, the way that it leaves my truck smelling, like all their different perfumes and whatever else going on. Yeah, I love it.
I love that. This may be the easiest question asked today. Who's going to win the next Super Bowl?
49ers.
What's the first book you remember reading?
First book I remember reading was a Father Richard Rohr book called Breathing Underwater.
Oh, I still subscribe to I read every day the Center for Action and Contemplation.
Yes, amazing.
Father Rohr, so thank you for that. Who's someone who broke a path that allowed you to become the man you are today? Who's a path breaker who made way for you?
Richard Allen Berry, Rick Berry. He is an incredibly passionate, talented, gifted man. He is an incredibly great model for how a husband should be, exemplary father, great community member and mentor. I love him.
If we walk down to your office right now, what tabs would be open on your computer?
None. Absolutely none.
That's the safest way to roll.
Yeah.
What's your favorite recipe they make in the kitchen?
Peanut butter cookies.
Peanut butter cookies. If you could travel anywhere in the world, where would you go tomorrow?
Back to Montana.
And finally, if you could write an official motto for Fresno, what would you make the motto of the city of Fresno?
We love hard.
Richard, I can't thank you for taking time away from everyone to have this conversation today. Tracy is going to be so mad that this is the one she had to miss. And I really do look forward to picking up this conversation, hopefully in Fresno over tacos. So just, Richard, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you. It's been an honor.
Richard Burrell is the founder and executive director of Live Again Fresno. We've put links to Live Again Fresno, as well as the Motel Drive documentary that we spoke about, in the show notes. PathBreakers is produced by the Kresge Foundation, which was founded in 1924 with a mission to promote human progress. Today, Kresge works to expand equity and opportunity in America's cities.
Read the stories of all of this season's Pathbreakers and learn about our grant-making and social investing work in Detroit, Memphis, New Orleans, Fresno, and cities across the U.S. at Kresge.org. To hear more stories from the Pathbreakers, be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts.
Our producers are Juliet Heinley and Zach Rosen. Managing editor is Krista Yankee. Our show art is by Rochelle Baker and creative direction by Alejandro Herrera.
Special thanks on this episode to audio engineer Keith Little for the tape sync in Fresno. And special thank you also to my colleagues on the American Cities and Health Programs for lifting up Richard and speaking his name as a truly phenomenal Pathbreaker. We'll talk to you all next week.